Good afternoon. My name is Doug Holscher, and I'm the director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, and it's my privilege to welcome each of you to the White House complex today. There are over 170 individuals from more than 40 states participating in today's important conference. Whether you're here representing Webster City, Iowa, Mariposa, California, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Flint, Michigan, or thousands of other communities, we appreciate your time and perspective. The White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs strives daily to build strong partnership between the federal government and our local, state, and tribal partners. We focus on advancing shared priorities like workforce development, combating opioids, and advancing opportunity zones, to name just a few. Tim Pataki and the Office of Public Liaison are helping co-produce today's event and have invited key community leaders, including faith leaders, private sector representatives, and economic development officials from across the country. We are very excited about today's agenda, and I want to give you a quick preview. First, Kevin Hassett, Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, will give an overview of the growing economy and the history of opportunity zones. Then, Secretary Steve Mnuchin will speak to you about Treasury's role and partnership with the private sector and state, local, and tribal leaders. Then HUD Secretary Ben Carson will discuss the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council and how federal resources can be leveraged. You will also hear from the National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow, Domestic Policy Council Director Joe Grogan, a stellar panel of key Opportunity Zones champions, and Brooke Rollins, who leads the Office of American Innovation. Following Brooke's remarks, we will have 2 hours of breakout sessions and then a networking reception. These will be important opportunities to identify and scale best practices across communities. Thank you again for coming today and sharing your time and perspective. We look forward to building and cultivating strong relationships with each of you so we can nurture growth and prosperity in communities across this great nation. Now, please help me in welcoming Kevin Hassett, Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors.
Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the White House, and thanks, Doug and team, for organizing this fantastic event. You know, one of the most significant serious problems affecting the U.S. economy is an inequality that people historically haven't spoken much about: geographic inequality. That there are pockets of our country where there's distress that's been lingering for years and years, if not decades. And in these pockets of distress, it's not uncommon for the unemployment rate to have been above 10% for more than a decade. It's not uncommon for opioid deaths to be about double the national average. It's not uncommon for people not to have access to clean water or effective sewer treatment or even public safety. And this problem of geographic inequality has been a key focus of the Trump administration ever since President Trump arrived. And I can say that I actually believe that it's true that my first Oval Office briefing with the president, I showed him a bunch of slides about things that we needed to think about. And I showed him a slide that talked about something that economists call the flypaper effect. And the flypaper effect is that if a map is sort of made out of flypaper, then when you drop people on the map, then they get sort of stuck where they are. And so right then, at that moment when I was briefing the president, I said that there are lots of pockets of the country with high unemployment rates. And then there are places where there are way more job openings than they have available workers, but the people aren't moving from one to the other the way they used to, in part because real estate prices are so different that if you sell your home in one place, you can't afford to live in another. I had my first Twitter experience with the president right after that, because just after I left the office, the president tweeted, you could go back and look, hey, if you're having trouble finding a job, you should move. That really happened. But the fact is that when you look at the data, it just breaks your heart to think about what it must be like to be a child growing up in a community where most people have given up on and they've left, and the schools aren't necessarily serving them well. And crime is so difficult that when you go to a convenience store, if you go to a inner city distressed community, very often the convenience stores, you can't go inside. They have like bank teller windows, right, where you say, I want the corn chips, and then they slide them out to you like they would in a bank window. And one of the things that we've noticed over time, and we've got a day today that's dedicated to helping people learn more about our #1 policy in this area. One of the things that we've noticed about this is that as an economist, if I present the facts about geographic inequality and about how terrible it has been in some communities because people have just given up on them, then I'll ask people to put their hands up, but I won't do it right now, and say, how many people here really want to do something to address this problem? And everybody always sticks their hand up. It doesn't matter whether they're a Democrat or a Republican or whatever else, however else they identify, they all want to help. But then I'll ask, well, who here has an idea on how we can help? And then there's silence and nobody puts their hand up because it's a really, really hard problem. And so what the president did is he prioritized, as we were working on the tax bill, that he told the team that we have to work on solving this problem. And what we did is that we developed and advocated and worked with people on the Hill to make sure it made it into the final law, an opportunity zone policy that has basically created a race to improve our most distressed communities around the country. And it does so basically by going back to that thing with the hands. It empowers you, everybody in this room, everybody watching on TV, everybody now that wants to make a difference can. Because what we've done is we've created a special tax law that makes it so that you can take some of your wealth, if you're fortunate, and you have wealth, you can take some of your wealth, you can invest it in an opportunity fund, which is a fund that's specially designed to help distressed communities. And then when you put the money in the opportunity fund then goes around, finds distressed communities, and starts to revive them. And as it does that, then the gains that you get from reviving the distressed community are taxed in a favorable way. Now, our belief is that the fundamental #1 social change that's happened because of this policy is that we've empowered Americans of good heart, of all parties, to make a difference, because we've created a vehicle so that you can make a difference with your money right now by investing in an opportunity fund that's going to go around and affect distressed communities. But we've also recognized that the best way to help, and we've learned this a lot by watching the American experience, is to create competition. And so right now, funds are being formed. We have a list that I was just looking at, more than 100 have already formed. And those funds are going to compete for your business. They're going to want to show that we're the best at delivering renewed hope to the hopeless. We're the best at finding distressed properties and turning them into flourishing properties. And so you should give us your money. And so the funds are competing for your business, but the distressed communities are competing for the funds business. And so if you've got a distressed community and the government hasn't been that functioning, then I can tell you, and I just visited one about a week ago, where the city planners were all over, okay, the opportunity zone thing is going to create a race to my town. How do we make sure that when people are looking at distressed communities, they put us at the top of the list? And so that the governments themselves are serving the people better by competing for the funds. And the funds are serving you better by competing for your business. And we believe that this is a transformational thing for society, because this idea that's a very old-fashioned Marxist idea that capital and labor are at war with one another can be disproven by big-hearted people who recognize that if they're fortunate, then they kind of have a responsibility. It's a social norm that you help distressed communities by taking some of your wealth and investing there. And so our belief is that this is going to have a big effect, and we're already seeing it in the data. If you look, it was only the second quarter of last year that the states themselves identified the distressed communities. One of the problems we had as we were designing the policy was thinking about, well, how do we identify which places most need the help that comes from this tax policy? And we decided that the optimal thing to do was to give that problem to the state. And so if you were to go to anybody in Montana and sort of say, what do you think are the most distressed parts about Montana? Then it's sort of like that old game show where you ask the audience, right? And if the audience is 90% tells you the same thing, then you kind of know it's the right answer. And so it's better to have the states judge that. And the states did that, and they identified distressed communities in the second quarter of last year. And we're already seeing really amazing changes. In the Zillow database that we have, so we've got like all the real estate transactions in the country. In the last year, since the second quarter of last year, real estate prices in communities that have been identified as opportunity zones are up 20% already, 20% in about a year. And that is sending help and hope to people who need it the most, because in a typical distressed community, more than half the people own their own homes. And so if real estate prices go up 20%, so say a $100,000 house is worth $120,000, then that's $20,000 of wealth that's just been given to one of the most needy people in society. And so what we're doing for the rest of the day is we're bringing out all the folks who've been working so hard on this for a couple of years to explain to you how it works, to tell you what we're learning and what we're seeing in the data, and to also help you create a social network of people who go out there and help people learn about this great opportunity that we've created. And the next person to come out and speak with you is the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin. And I can say that Secretary Mnuchin has been absolutely a priceless member of the team in this effort, because unlike me, the nerdy economist, he actually spent his career investing in things. And he knows investment. And so Secretary, yes? Oh, so they just switched the order. So now I'm introducing Secretary Ben Carson. And Secretary Ben Carson has also been a priceless member of the team, because as you know, as a world-famous surgeon, he's about the smartest guy in every room that you ever go into. And he's now the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Department, which has so many programs that can be used to magnify the impact of opportunity zones. And so Secretary Carson is going to come out and tell you both about the council that he's going to be running and about the steps that he's already taking at HUD to make sure that the policies that he has control over are working to magnify the impact of this really terrific policy. And with that, I introduce to you, assuming that he's arrived, Secretary Ben Carson. Secretary Carson? Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Welcome to the White House. So it is one of those things that happens, that ad hoc Oval Office things tend to happen all the time, and so I'm happy to take some questions. So if anyone wants to ask me a question about opportunity zones or anything else, then yes.
My name is Fuad Swais. I came from Santa Ana in Orange County, California. Mm-hmm. I have a long background in construction development. I worked as city engineer for San Francisco. I managed over $5 billion worth of projects. The time duration for delivery of projects of 30 months, which is in the code, I think it's somewhat limited. It may distract, it may not attract as many funds or as many investments into opportunity zones because of the risk of not completing the projects within that time frame. Mm-hmm. And it will be really great if consideration is given to extending that time frame from 30 months to 60 months. 5 years will allow projects to go through the planning, permitting, and make sure the projects are well thought of, delivered in time, less risk, and also spreads the wealth, which is job creation, and investments over a longer period of time than 2.5 years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that comment. And the thing I can say is that if you read the law that creates the opportunity zones, then it's a relatively short little thing. And that to turn the law, the idea, into something that you can actually enforce in practice at the IRS or the Treasury requires an enormous amount of rulemaking. And that rulemaking has multiple rounds. And so the first set of rules have been out for a while. There's another set coming out soon. As those rules come out, we invite comment. One of the key points, so this is the best part about your question, to remind everybody here, one of the key points about having an event like the one that we have here today is that we invite people like you who know your communities the best to tell us what your experience is and to look at the rules that we've got and help us learn about what we can do better. And so, thank you so much for that comment, and I'm sure that the people who are working on crafting the next set of rules will take it seriously. Do we have other questions? Yes, thanks. I've got you right there. Yeah.
My name is Malachi O'Brien from Kansas City. I represent one of the faith leaders that's here. Would you speak into how faith leaders can better be a part of the Opportunity Zones? Because I know within congregations, ministries, there's plenty of people that want to make a huge difference in these Opportunity Zones. So from your perspective, can you speak into that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that and I emphasize this in my remarks, and I think it's something that it's easy to miss if you look at the policy. That I think that the best thing about the policy might really be that it helps us with the problem that there's so much division in society. One of the things that we've done is we've created this world where the people who have had a lot of success and want to help don't know how to do it. They don't have a vehicle through which they can help. And so that I think that it could be the people who benefit the most from this spiritually are the people who are helping as much as the people who are the targets of the capital flow. But I could say that message is a natural message for of every denomination, spiritual leaders of every denomination. That hey, if you find yourself to be a fortunate person and you're wondering what can I do to help, then you should certainly volunteer your time and coach Little League and play in neighborhoods that maybe have a lot of single moms and all the things that I'm sure you're already talking about. But I think investing in opportunity funds would be a really great thing to add to the list of ways that you can help people make a difference. And as a spiritual leader, you know that when people find themselves making a difference, it fundamentally changes their life. They become much, much happier people. And so again, I think that this Opportunity Zone effort in the Tax Cut Act, it was scored at costing over 10 years about $1.5 billion, which makes it look like a tiny little thing. But I think that when we look back at the history of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that we're going to think that the thing that transformed our country the most was the creation of the Opportunity Fund, because it basically, first it revived the distressed communities that needed the help the most, but it also reconnected people that had been separated, that people who wanted to help, but the people who maybe needed help, that there was no way to connect them really except through governments that weren't so effective. And so now we've taken, say, our most talented investment funds or investment firms, and we've challenged them with connecting the people who want to help with the people who need help, and it's a beautiful thing. Yes, sir.
I'm K.V. Kumar, National Indian American Chamber of Commerce. I also happen to today represent the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce as well.
Oh, here's a mic too, thank you.
I'm representing the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce also. I think in addition to your programs at the White House and elsewhere, sir, it's a good idea to have some kind of a town hall meetings around the country. Personally, I'm helping the state of Mississippi, especially in Hermanville, Mississippi. They don't have a store, they don't have a reading room for the next 25 miles. And the National Indian American Chamber of Commerce is helping them to do that. And if you can send some people from the White House or the departments that concern and come over to the states and have town hall meetings, and I'm sure the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce will coordinate, we will coordinate to have such meetings.
Well, thank you so much for that thought. And that's something that a lot of folks in the White House team and in the cabinet have already been doing. I know Secretary Carson is on the road sometimes, it seems like almost every day. You mentioned Mississippi, and one of the stories you'll hear more about today is that there's a lot of early evidence, I told you, that these funds are working. I mentioned the data of a 20% increase in real estate prices, but there's a wonderful story in Mississippi that, I don't know if there's someone from Vicksburg here, but yes, so the mayor of Vicksburg, so that there's a lumber mill in Vicksburg that had been closed for how many years? A long time. and the governor of Mississippi told us that it's opened up again because somebody's taking advantage of this new law and that they've hired 130 people. Is that correct? Or is the governor exaggerating? Yeah, but that's right. And so that's the thing that we expect to happen. And I think that even I just traveled to my hometown, and the town across the river from my hometown is a place called Turner's Falls, Massachusetts, which used to be really the center of American industry because it was the biggest waterfall in the Connecticut River, and so that's where all the hydroelectric power in the world was in the late 1800s, seriously. And so that every factory in the world was there, but now it's just ruined factories. And I was there with a New York Times writer talking about the opportunity zones and looking specifically at this old place where I grew up. And we pulled the data before we went up, and since the second quarter of last year in Turners Falls, Massachusetts, real estate prices increased 13%. 13% already. And the thing is that I know there are lots of representatives of distressed communities or people who know them well in this audience, and the idea that you could take a place like that and have real estate prices jump 13% in a year, that you could come up with a policy that would do it, it's almost unthinkable. And a nice metric of how we're doing. We got another question over here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The question that I have for you is, how do you balance, as you said before, these communities have been distressed and disinvested for 10 years or better. They have a lot of social challenges. So how do you balance this influx in economic activity and accelerated market values or property values with gentrification, which is a problem that comes up as we try to explain this to this community?
Well, I think Secretary Carson is going to talk some about that specific question, because affordable housing is part of what HUD's all about. But again, if you take a typical distressed community, then 50 to 70% of the people living in a distressed community own their own homes. And so if you see a 20% increase in real estate prices in distressed community, then the increase in value is benefiting the people who need the money the most in society. And so I think that there are gentrification concerns in the sense that you don't want to price people out of the place where they've lived their whole life. But I think that if we can return strong schools, strong public services, jobs, wage growth, and the rest to a place that we can trust that almost everybody in that space is going to be better off. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I'm Vince Williams, the mayor of Union City, Georgia. I'm 10 minutes south of Atlanta. And I'm concerned about the best way to market the opportunity zones in your area, but also how do you encourage, or rather entice, the investors to come into the area and do more than just park the investment. And that's something I'm very concerned about, because we've seen that happen around the country because of the breaks, but we want to make sure that they're doing more than just parking and getting the breaks for the investment.
You know, that your concern that you just raised is one that I've heard from the beginning from the Treasury Secretary, who has really worked doggedly at making sure that the rules don't allow abuse or simple sort of laundering of gains through zones without building businesses and so on. And so you basically, if you want to get a benefit from this policy, you have to acquire a property in a distressed community and improve it significantly. And the improvement is a real big part of the story. And so I think that the maximum gain you get from this is from investing in a distressed community and leaving your money there for a decade. And so it's not, it could have been that if designed poorly, that what this did is it created a vehicle for people to take their gains and sort of wash them through a distressed community and then take them out and then, avoid U.S. tax without really helping anybody. But I think that the rules are really quite stringent, and that the odds of such behavior being significant are close to zero. And so yeah, I think that, but again, that's another thing. I was praising Secretary Mnuchin, thinking that he'd be the next guy up. That was the last list I looked at. But he absolutely has been fantastic about that, because he's seen it all. He's been a movie producer, right? And so he's dealt with just about every kind of contract you could imagine. Yeah, thanks. Do you have a question over right here, ma'am?
Oh. Dr. Tamika Ledbetter, Commissioner of the Great State of Alaska for the Department of Labor and Workforce Development.
Oh,
and so my question is essentially, we believe in Alaska that landowners and business owners do understand some of the opportunities in those opportunity zones, but what are we doing to inform the financial sector, the financial industry, those individuals who they have clients and they're helping their clients to understand investing in where and the best place to invest. And so what are we doing in that respect, and what are we doing in terms of the culture of certain places like Alaska, where rural doesn't mean 1 hour drive up the road, but it may be a small plane flight to an area. And so I just wanted to know, what is our goal in that?
Sure. So one of the things that you're going to see is that at President Trump's insistence, we've put together an incredible team of people to support this effort, including people who you'll hear from that communicate way better than the nerdy economists that they started the day out with, right? So you keep going up from here. And I think that the members of the team include a crack set of people from the Department of Treasury who understand the nuances of every rule in a way that like this question over here maybe suggested he would want to explore that, to people with strong connections in faith communities and so on to help them think about what to do. And so I think that our communications strategy on this is like we're all in. You know, I welcome your feedback at the end of the day if you can think of a way that we could make the team even better. But the fact is that this is something that what is President Trump really good at? I mean, there's a lot of things, but one of them is communicating. And this is a very high priority for him, which is why we have this event today. And so I think that our communication efforts on this, they're really going to lift off. And one of the reasons why we're having this event today is that we think that we're just reaching the process where the regs are finalized. Here he is. I guess they're telling me that I need brain surgery. But today the rules are being finalized so that we think the starting gun is really, maybe it was fired last year, which is why we already see the big real estate price increases. But with the next set of rules that come out, then we think that the activity is basically going to lift off like a rocket ship. And so now is the time for us to get the message out there. And so now here to talk to you about all the things that he's doing both with the council, but also with his own department to make sure that his department's policies are funneling the help that's needed to make sure that the places that want to revive have the government resources that are necessary to do so, is my good friend, Secretary Carson. Secretary Carson.
Well, so glad all of you are here today for this really wonderful part of the kickoff. It's been going on for a little while, but now we're having a more official type of kickoff. And I want to thank all of the state, local, community officials who have sacrificed in order to partner with us, in order to serve the public. And under the President's leadership, this administration and our nation is experiencing an incredible time period, which unemployment is low and job creation is high, economic growth is phenomenal, people are optimistic about their financial futures. And yet we share a duty to ensure that every single American citizen has an opportunity to enjoy the gains of the past couple of years. At HUD, our mission is to ensure that every American has access to safe, decent, affordable housing. And one of the ways that we can meet this mission is by advancing economic opportunity, which brings me to the topic of opportunity zones. Few programs in modern American history have had the potential to touch so many lives as opportunity zones, which were created as a result of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And it's really designed to stimulate economic activity in some of the low-income neighborhoods of our nation. Nearly 35 million people live in opportunity zones. And that's almost 10% of the country's population that will now have a pathway to financial success due to the single stroke of a pen. So I want to thank the President for that. The residents of opportunity zones are indeed some of the nation's most needy and underserved communities. In opportunity zones, for example, the median family income is 37% less than the state median. Home ownership rate 15% lower than the national average. And as many of you know, home ownership is the principal mechanism for wealth accumulation in our country. The average net worth of a renter, $5,000. The average net worth of a homeowner, $200,000. It's a 40-fold difference. The average poverty rate, 32% in opportunity zones, 17% nationwide. Average life expectancy, here's one that hits home for everybody. 3 years less for people living in opportunity zones. Now, in medicine, there's often a trade-off between solutions that are fast-acting and solutions that are long-lasting. With opportunity zones, we sort of have a combination of both worlds. The fast-acting impact of opportunity zones is evident from the fact that we've already heard many positive reports from city officials of things that have happened that are already attracting a lot of economic activity. For example, in Maryland, where I lived for 36 years, Governor Larry Hogan proposed spending $56.6 million in state money for job training programs and tax incentives to supercharge the Opportunity Zone revitalization and transform those parts of Maryland that have been economically neglected. And in Mississippi, Governor Phil Bryant has approved a special Opportunity Zone cycle as part of the low-income housing tax credit program offered through the Mississippi Home Corporation. And I had an opportunity to visit Mississippi and go to one of the Opportunity Zones where a sawmill was saved by the fact that new owners came in, recognized the opportunity that existed for them, bought the place, revitalized it, started hiring people, and then as a result of that, builders came in and started building homes for them. So the spreading effect. Cities across the country are developing Opportunity Zone investment prospectuses to attract private business. These hubs include places like Erie, Pennsylvania, Louisville, Kentucky. Is it Louisville or Louisville, the capital of Kentucky? It's Frankfurt. Okay. Anyway. Oklahoma City, South Bend, Indiana, Stockton, California. I like to get people on that. Anyway, one time I was giving a speech at Harvard, and I said, well, you got all these smart people. You should be able to answer that question. They were, Louisville. Anyway. But Opportunity Zones also deliver long-lasting solutions by structuring rewards to serve local communities for the long term. And only investors who commit their money for 5, 7, 10 years receive the result. And the cool thing is, if you're going to be investing your money for a long period of time, you're going to be real interested in the return on investment. So you're not going to just walk away. You're going to be interested in making sure that there is economic success in that area. That's one of the real beauties of this program. And it means that new growth becomes consistent growth, new jobs become stable jobs. And to ensure that Opportunity Zones reach their potential, the President has established the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, which I'm privileged to chair. And that council consists of 13 federal agencies and maintains a core mission and function of leading joint efforts across the executive departments to engage with state, local, and tribal governments so that we can better use public funds to revitalize urban and economically distressed communities. I'm not just interested in urban communities, by the way, rural communities, suburban communities, exurbs, every place. By utilizing a single body to achieve interagency consensus, we get real synergy. And it eliminates a lot of the inefficiencies when things have to go from one agency to another agency. So things can be done much more quickly and much more efficiently. And as the chair of the council, I'll be advised by 5 subcommittees, each with a unique and necessary work stream. 4 subcommittees will focus on administrative issues to identify, to target, to streamline, and to coordinate federal program efforts to these opportunity zones. And the fifth subcommittee will focus on developing and implementing robust measures and analytic tools to gauge the effectiveness of the Opportunity Zone tax incentive and the council's activities. You know, being able to look at evidence makes all the difference in the world. And, you know, you look at something like life expectancy. Before the last turn of the century, not 2000, but the one before that, the average life expectancy in this country was less than 50 years. Now it's approaching 80 years. What's the difference? The difference is that the medical community learned to use evidence to advocate for policy change. Using evidence makes all the difference in the world, particularly in medicine. Not so much in government in the past, but we're changing that now. We're going to change that. Now, the first work stream is economic development, and that's going to be led by the Department of Commerce. The goal of this subcommittee is to leverage federal grants and loans in a much more integrated way to develop dilapidated properties, provide basic infrastructure and financial tools that will attract private investment. The second work stream is entrepreneurship, led by the Small Business Administration. And the aim of this subcommittee is to leverage government lending and grants to stimulate access to private capital and promote programs that assist entrepreneurs. And there are a lot of entrepreneurs in some of these economically deprived areas, but, you know, unlike the Princeton graduate who has lots of connections, they can't get anybody to back what they're doing. This will help to alleviate that problem. The third work stream is safe neighborhoods. That will be led by the Department of Justice. This subcommittee will be focused on combating drug addiction and the opioid crisis, which is rampant everywhere, opportunity zones and non-opportunity zones, and looking at reducing crime and enhancing public safety, and as well as addressing environmental obstacles to development. The fourth work stream is education and workforce development. That'll be led by the Departments of Education and Labor. The goal of this subcommittee, improve the efficacy of K through 12 education, and that includes promoting charter schools. You know, I went to one community that had been redeveloped, Eastlake in Atlanta. Some of you are familiar with it. It was the worst area that you can possibly imagine in everything, and crime, and schools were accomplishing at the lowest level in the state. Nobody wanted to live there. Through public-private partnerships, the whole area was revitalized. And I went to the charter high school, and I was met by 5 students playing the harp as I entered. And I was just astonished at the things that they offered in that school. They went from the bottom of the state in achievement to the top in the state, better than the private schools. Just goes to show what the potential is. And the fifth and final work stream is focused on measurement and analysis, and that will be led by the Council of Economic Advisors. And you know how they love to play with numbers, so we get them involved early on here and utilizing those to help us formulate policy as we go on, almost in real time. And you know, through these committees, we want to develop robust reporting and analytics so that we can measure the impact of these opportunity zones. To leverage these work streams and achieve the goals of the Council, a number of actions are already underway or are planned by the various agencies. Council is going to be conducting listening tours in rural, urban, and suburban opportunity zones, as well as other distressed communities in all the geographic locations during the spring and summer of 2019. And these listening tours will include community leaders as well as entrepreneurs and investors, and they'll be tailored to all 5 work streams. Now, as of now, the Council has identified more than 160 different programs that could increase targeting to opportunity zones through grant preference points, loan qualifications, reduced fees, and modifications in eligibility criteria. Council is also developing a uniform opportunity zone training manual for all the federal agency field staff. And this manual will help create a national network of surrogates to train communities, entrepreneurs, and investors about opportunity zones. The Council will further develop and publish practices almost in real time for each work stream at the state, local, and tribal levels, as well as a comprehensive list of all federal programs available to assist Opportunity Zone communities, entrepreneurs, and investors. And the Council is developing opportunityzones.gov. That's a website that will provide community leaders as well as entrepreneurs and investors with a common point of reference for all available Opportunity Zone information, the tools, practices, Council actions, and resources. It's a bedrock of our founding beliefs and guiding ideals that America itself is an opportunity zone. We call this the land of opportunity. Even though some people like to badmouth our country, do you know of any other place where people are forming caravans trying to get in? Obviously, this is an opportunity zone. Every street, every city, every stretch along every road should indeed be a zone that opportunity calls home. So, thanks to the President's leadership, this Opportunity Zone program, the efforts of the Revitalization Council, we are working to make the bold goal of an ordinary, everyday reality shared by millions of American men and women who call this great country their home. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you. It's terrific to be here with everybody. Glad to follow Secretary. And I'm here to, first I'm just going to talk a little bit briefly about the economy, and then I'm going to talk about regulations, which I think there's some interest in this room, so people know how we can actually start putting money to invest. So let me just comment briefly on the President's economic program, which we've talked about from the beginning: tax cuts, regulatory relief, and trade. And I'm pleased to report we are making progress on all 3 fronts, and we've really seen this in the economic performance. Last year we hit 3% economic growth. A lot of people said that could never be done in the U.S. We didn't accept that, and the President delivered on that. That means more jobs and more opportunities. We also had historic tax reform last year, hadn't been done in 30 years. And I'm excited to be here today to talk about one specific part of the tax reform, which was opportunity zones. I think this is really an extraordinary program to incentivize private capital into opportunity zones and redevelop communities. At the Treasury, we've been tasked with issuing guidelines to implement opportunity zones. We take this very seriously. We want to make sure there's the right guidance so that investors can start investing and communities can immediately get the benefit of this. Treasury and IRS working together have tried to create as much flexibility for communities and investors so that we are positioning this economic development incentive for success. And today I'm happy to report that we are proposing our second set of regulations. I'd like to walk through just some of these, and then I'm happy to take questions. And I'm going to give you some technical things. This may be a little bit too technical for the crowd, but people have been interested in this. So the first part is qualified opportunity funds have periodic test dates to ensure that most of their assets are invested in opportunity zones. And we've proposed to allow investors to exclude cash or cash equivalents from this calculation if received within 6 months of the testing date, while the fund decides how to invest the money to create flexibility. We provide clarity for investors on what counts as a qualified opportunity zone business property. I would note that land used in a trade or business can count as a, quote, good asset, and leased property can also count as a good asset in many circumstances. We offer simple valuation techniques for business property, including unadjusted cost basis for purchased property or the present value of lease payments for leased property. We provide additional clarity on certain items, including the requirement that substantially all property must be in the zone, as well as the meaning of the term original use of property. We address, which we've heard, concerns about the requirement that 50% of a business's gross income come from active conduct of a business in this zone. And for this requirement, we provide options for measuring this amount, including measuring the services performed by hours, or by the amount paid for services, or by considering a broader set of facts and circumstances. And this is very important because I think a lot of people look at the real estate opportunity, but what we're very excited is about the opportunity to create new businesses or expand existing businesses in opportunity zones. We've heard your request for flexibility regarding working capital, and we are proposing that working capital can be used for the development of a trade or business, not only for tangible property. We're also providing for multiple overlapping working capital deployments, so long as each one has a written plan and realistic schedule. In other words, if you have capital that's been committed but not yet deployed, we've provided certainty how that can be used as working capital. Finally, we are permitting an extension of time to use working capital if there's an interruption in a project caused by a lack of government action, such as delayed permits. I'm sure that's something that people in this room have a little bit of experience on. And if there's regulatory delay, we don't want to penalize investors on technical issues. We've also provided that qualified opportunity fund interests passed down through inheritance retain their original tax benefits, effectively eliminating any death tax that might otherwise be due. If somebody unfortunately dies along the way, we don't want to penalize them in this process. These are just some of the issues we've addressed. We're hopeful that we've provided enough guidance that investors and communities can begin to deploy capital in opportunity zones. I would encourage you to continue providing comments through this comment period because this really does help us. And yes, we really do read them all. I may not personally, but we do, and they get summarized for me. And I've been intimately involved in each one of these regulations to make sure that they are as friendly to the community and the investors as possible. I want to close by reiterating that the economy is much stronger today than it was before President Trump took office. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being invested in our economy. Hardworking Americans have more career opportunities and higher wages than ever before. And now is the time to make sure that prosperity reaches as many communities as possible. Opportunity zones will play a key role in making sure that this occurs. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take a few questions.
Mr. Secretary, I'm K.V. Kumar from the National Indian American Chamber of Commerce. Today, I'm also representing the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce at the President's request.
Terrific. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks to President Trump and you for making this economy a wonderful economy. And the question is,
I'll
yeah.
clap for that.
Mr. Secretary, I have a small question. There are, you mentioned, touched briefly on that one. There are many issues that you can cope up with. Sometimes, delays occur. But what about the unforeseen extreme situations when it happens? The investors can come back to you or to you, whoever it is, and request for an extension?
Well, I want to be careful in pre-committing depending upon what those unforeseen issues are. But I would say, again, as much flexibility as we have in the context of the law, we will do if there are unforeseen circumstances.
Good morning, Secretary Canal Merchant from Cal OZ in California. We are Canal Merchant from Cal OZ in California. We're one of the 9 states that is yet to do tax conformance, and we're in the process of getting through that right now. And I think part of what will move the needle for folks in California who are still wrapping their head around this program is the whole metrics and reporting piece. Can you provide some visibility into, is that included in the second regs? Is it a subsequent tranche? And then what should states be doing around that issue to make sure that in a year's time we're still aligned with the federal government?
Sure. Well, I still spend a lot of time in California, so I look forward to this being a great success in California. We are going to come out with reporting requirements. We felt that just in terms of prioritizing things, we wanted to get out the issues that affect investment right away. We've taken a bunch of comments. If you have ideas on reporting, I think we want to get the right balance between not creating something that's too bureaucratic. We don't want this to be big government with oodles of reporting. We do want to have proper reporting so that we can monitor the success of the programs in the community. I think that's something that's important that we're able to report back to Congress on. In the back.
Mr. Secretary, I'm Stephen Pryor. I'm the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Rhode Island. Thank you for your comments on the... Stephen Pryor from the state of Rhode Island. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your comments on the gross income requirement, the 50% gross income requirement. Sounds like you articulated 3 or perhaps more alternative criteria. Could you just lay those out with a bit more detail and just explain if we're very interested in ensuring that operating businesses can be the recipients of these investments? Do those criteria replace the requirement for a gross income showing, or do they supplement, and how does that work?
Well, I'm just giving you a summary of the things that we put out today, so I'd encourage you to look at the actual regs. I think they're like this thick, and my understanding is at 1 o'clock they were posted, so hopefully they're up online. This was one of the things that we did receive a lot of comments on, and what we wanted to try to solve for was if you headquartered a company in the Opportunity Zone, and you had the majority of your staff in the Opportunity Zone, yet you sold throughout other places, which is common for lots of businesses, that there were ways to meet this test. We wanted to create as much flexibility. So there's a multi-part test of how you can look to solve this. But again, this was a real-world example that we didn't want just to have businesses that were located in the Opportunity Zone and sold things in the Opportunity Zone. That would have been very limiting. As I like to say, hopefully the next Google and Facebook get started in Opportunity Zones. In the back.
Angela Stanton King with the American King Foundation out of Atlanta, Georgia. My question is, are there any type of provisions or possible incentives for big developers, maybe like a 1031 exchange or something that's coming to community zones so that a minority partner out of that community can be involved? And I think that would kind of like be a great idea to prevent gentrification.
That's an interesting idea, and again, I'd encourage you if you could just send us that idea. We'll take a look at the specifics of it and get back to you. So again, we're trying to be as user-friendly within the context of the law. In the back.
So trying to wrap my head around What do you do when you have an anomaly? And I say that because King George County supervisor in Virginia, I also represent the 12 southern states through the National Association of Counties. Population in my county is 25,000, but I house the Dahlgren Naval Installation, the premier research and development for the Navy. With that, so I have 6,700 residents who work at the Naval Station, which gives them an average salary of $98,729. But the rest of my community, the other 5,000 residents who are employed, their average salary is $35,000. And so because of that skewing, I am not able to declare an opportunity zone. So when I looked at trying to do one for part of my county, along with the neighboring county, to do it jointly to incentivize our industrial parks, we don't qualify. So how do we work around an anomaly like that?
Sure. Well, let me just say, again, I think the law addressed a lot of issues, but the law is not perfect. So, step one is things that we can do within the context of the law, we're doing through regulations. Again, I'd encourage you to send us the specifics of yours. I'm hoping at some point that we can go back to Congress and show the success of this program. And if there are some things that we can't do by regulation, where there are legitimate abnormalities or things like that, getting some congressional cleanup, so that's something we would consider. Again, I think this is something that has huge bipartisan support. So it's not something we're going to do right away, but if there are issues that you have, again, that we can't solve right now, we'll keep them in the queue.
Thank you, Secretary. Jennifer Olson, I'm from the state of Montana. My question is regarding the timeframes that are associated. I don't know if the new second round of regulations coming out addresses this, but speaking from a rural perspective, we have a lot of rural communities that may be thinking about permitting processes, working through their own local land use regulations in order to incentivize opportunity zone funds to be used in their areas. And so with the timing being critical with businesses and opportunity funds starting by the end of this year and really the next 2 years being a critical factor, is there any wiggle room or allowance for smaller rural areas, particularly that are looking to maybe apply for, I was just talking with RD about capacity building funding or other federal funding available for capacity building that would allow for an extension of that time or better use of that time or anything that would help rural communities succeed?
Sure. Well, I mean, let me just comment. We always want to help rural communities. It's an important part. And again, I would say certain flexibilities we have. We don't have flexibilities for extension. The good news is the funding period is open for a significant period of time. So, although you have to deploy capital quickly, I think my own opinion is you'll see a series of funds. My guess is you'll see a 2019 fund, a 2020 fund, a 2021 fund to match these issues. And one of the things we encourage, and why I'm pleased that all of you are here, is we want to work with kind of the state and local governments to figure out what state and local incentives can be attached to the Opportunity Zone program to really turbocharge these in your communities.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Bob Turner from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm here to represent the realtors across the country. I love the program. I'm actually developing affordable housing and rental properties, apartments in opportunity zones that I own. So I'm a practitioner also. My question is, what in the Opportunity Fund regulations allows for affordable housing, which is a tremendous problem across the country and every one of the cities represented in here? If I'm developing property and I'm selling it, building housing and selling it to homeowners, there's nothing in this law that helps us with that, is there?
I think on, kind of obviously in affordable housing, there's affordable homes that you can buy, and obviously there's affordable rental property. So I think you're right. I can go back and check, but I think the business of building homes and selling them, I'm not sure that qualifies. Obviously, creating rental properties, there's big incentives around doing that. But again, I'll put my technical experts on the question of the investment in the home doesn't qualify, I don't know if the answer is if you create a business and have working capital and the business is actually the building of homes. So we can look at that example.
From a development standpoint, we can put money in there and develop it, but it's more short term. It doesn't meet the regulations for the 5 years, 7 years, 10 years.
Exactly.
So if you
I'm just saying there may be aspects of an operating business that you can create, and the operating business qualifies. Right. The ownership of a home, if you build a home and sell it in 18 months, you're not going to meet the requirement. And again, I would say, although the legislation is not perfect, what we want is we want people who are long-term investors in building businesses in these communities. So there may be aspects of services, businesses, and other things, the actual building. So we'll work with you on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
By the way, I'm the warm-up act for the president. He's running a little bit late. Don't ask him regulation questions, please.
Michael Lithcott, I just want to have a...
But he is a builder, so he may be very sympathetic to your building example.
Just a brief follow-up. In terms of rolling over investments from one opportunity zone opportunity to another, if there's an opportunity to get liquidity in case you sell something, but you want to continue to deploy capital in an opportunity zone, does the new regulations address how to do that?
It doesn't address that, and that's still something we're looking at. And there's both legal issues that we're addressing, and there's also policy issues. I mean, again, one of the things I want to make sure is we don't have a churn and burn. I want to make sure that someone doesn't invest in the community, sell it 2 years later, the buyer leaves the community. So, I mean, although we want to create flexibility, we also want to make sure that people are investing in these communities and not leaving them. So your specific thing isn't particularly addressed in this. Or to put it another way, the current regulations don't allow for that.
Hi, my name is Tony Tress. I'm the President and CEO of the Institute for Portfolio Alternatives. Our members include some of the largest fund managers, as well as capital sources, broker-dealers.
You're a popular person in this room.
One of the challenges we've had to date, especially from a fund standpoint, and you're hopefully going to solve some of the issues, is really with the new regs, helping bring some clarity around the fund structures themselves. But up until this point in time, a lot of our members, the broker-dealers, RAs, and other capital sources, have struggled with some of the regulatory oversight. They, state level, FINRA, SEC. What has the administration done to bring those regulatory bodies up to speed? Because even though we've got clarity on the fund structure, there's concerns from the broker-dealers and RA standpoint who are looking to put clients into these particular funds, the risk of regulatory oversight?
Well, I mean, the answer is that the first step is making sure we get the regulations out so that people who want to invest have the proper guidance. We haven't yet been working with the regulators, but I chair FSOC, so this is something we'll review with the regulators. And we'll want to strike the right balance to make sure that investors have proper disclosure. They know what they're investing in, with making sure there's not too much disclosure that it pushes people away. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. My name is Joshua Higginbotham. I'm from West Virginia. I'm actually in the West Virginia legislature and the chairman of the Economic Development Committee in the House. My question is actually about young people. In the Mountain State, we have a lot of young West Virginians leaving our state. So as a millennial lawmaker, I'm trying to focus on
lower taxes.
Yes. Well, we actually had an opportunity zone bill that unfortunately was vetoed by the governor that would eliminate the corporate income tax in opportunity zones. I was the lead sponsor of that. And we actually had more support in the Democratic Party than we had in the Republican Party, but it passed 97-3. We're still working on that. But my question is, how can we educate and inform millennial business owners, small business owners, about taking advantage of opportunity zones? What's happening at the federal level for that, and what can we do at the state level to improve that?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the answer is both. So, I mean, we're doing at the federal level what I call kind of federal road shows, where we want to make sure that the states understand these programs. And we've also had meetings with big fund operators and things like that, so they get it. But I think the best thing is that each state that has an economic area, you know, this has to be one of the highest priorities within the state to dedicate resources. And, you know, look, I think there's a great opportunity for everybody in the room. It's also going to be a competitive opportunity. So each state has different benefits, and certain businesses will fit better in certain states, certain businesses. So, you know, I would encourage, you know, kind of people create opportunity zone fairs, no different than job fairs, where you can educate young people. And I would say, again, the biggest opportunity is for people who are starting businesses. This is really, you know, if you are starting a business today, to be able to get the benefits of this, I think it's just enormous. So we look forward to working with all of you. I'll take a couple of more, and then we'll give you a short break.
This is a question from an economic developer who actually emailed me and is watching online, and I'm Frank Williams from Brunswick County, North Carolina.
I'm impressed. I like that.
They want to know if you would consider extending the 2026 deadline to get the maximum 15% capital gains deferral.
I believe that requires congressional approval, but as I said before, you know, I hope once we get this program getting up and running, we can go back to Congress and consider changes. Why don't I take last question?
We have time for one more question.
Yes, you.
Good afternoon. I'm Shawn Neidorf from the Arizona Commerce Authority, and we've been very curious about how interim gains will be treated, particularly coming off operating businesses. This has been one of the concerns that have drawn people more toward real estate, because whatever else you can be sure of, it doesn't get up and move, whereas a business can, or it can be sold, and if you're a minority shareholder, you may be forced into a distribution and therefore forced into having interim gains. So there's been a great deal of interest and a lot of questions about how interim gains will be treated and what the rules will be for reinvestment and how they will be treated as a tax event.
So thank you. There is some guidance in this. And again, what we're striking the balance, because I understand the issue. On the one hand, you know, you want to have the benefit of holding it for 10 years to get the full benefit. So interim gains there's some guidance on this, but again, I think for the moment, what we're focused on is making sure that we incent people into businesses who will stay there. So you're right. I mean, it's hard to be a minority investor and invest in a business where you don't have certain guarantees that the business isn't going to be sold. So I mean, on the one hand, I want to make this investor friendly. On the other hand, as I said, I don't want to have a situation where, you know, you create a great business in a community, it's doing a phenomenal job in that community, and 2 years later, the investors decide they're just going to go sell that business to somebody else and reinvest somewhere else, and the buyer is going to move it. So these are issues we're dealing with, the policy issues and the legal issues, and trying to get the right balance. But I think the good news is, hopefully there should be enough guidance that came out today that people are now ready to invest, that funds can be up and running. It may not be that every single investment type we've provided clarity, but we've provided clarity for an awful lot. So I look forward to speaking to you next year. I'm sure we'll have more questions, and thank you all for being here. So I just want to clarify, because I know we had some online followers, and I said that the regulations were going up at 1. I understand we have some technical issues, and they haven't gone up yet, so if you can't find them yet, please do not worry. They will be up shortly. And the second thing I would say is Director Kudlow will be here shortly, and he'll be speaking and then introducing the President. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you very much. I'll be extremely brief, especially by my own standards. President Donald Trump has taken steps to rebuild the American economy with tax cuts and deregulation and energy openings and trade reform and has reinstilled the spirit of growth, prosperity, entrepreneurship. And today we're going to celebrate a part of his program coming out of the tax bill. These are the opportunity and revitalization zones, opportunity zones, which I think are going to grow and prosper almost more than anybody believes. It's almost like a sleeper, but get ready, from private investment capital, right? Private investment capital, the old-fashioned way, and folks, men and women, starting their own businesses. It'll be in the cities, and it'll be in the rural areas, and my great hope is it'll take this great Trump prosperity into every nook and cranny of the American economy, something we've really never seen before. So, just my great honor to serve and my great honor to introduce President Donald Trump.
Thank you very much. Please sit down, please. It's a great honor. I want to thank Larry. He's been fantastic. We've had a lot of good luck together over the years, and he's been really, he stepped up to the plate, and we're zooming, and our country's doing well with the hottest economy in the world. We're by far the biggest economy in the world. We weren't. When I first came, it was heading in the wrong direction, and now we're in the right direction. Our trade deal with China is moving along, and it's moving along nicely, and we're asking for a lot of things, and I have a feeling we'll be successful, and it'll be good for both countries, but that's moving along quite well. You'll be hearing about it very, very shortly. Today, we are proud to be joined by state and local leaders from both parties, including mayors and county commissioners, people I know very well in some cases. Some cases, I hate to say it, probably shouldn't admit it, people I've dealt with in my pre-life. And there are a lot of professionals, I will tell you. I know very well what you do, and they're great professionals, not easy. Economic development officers and tribal leaders and entrepreneurs and faith leaders. Paula White, thank you very much. You've been so helpful. Thank you, Paula. Pastor Paula. She's fantastic. Thank you all for pouring your heart and your soul into rebuilding our communities and restoring hope in every part of our great land. That's what's happening. We're here to celebrate opportunity zones, and who would have thought this was going to be so successful? Who would have thought when we first proposed the idea? They said, well, things like this have been talked about, but it never happened. But the numbers are incredible, what's happened in a very short period of time. It's really a crucial part of our new tax law to help low-income Americans. As you know, this vital provision gives businesses a massive incentive to invest and create jobs in our nation's most underserved communities. I want to thank Secretary Steve Mnuchin and Secretary Ben Carson, who were right here, and they are. They're waving to me through the door. And that's okay. Just stay there, fellas. They've already heard from me. And they're doing a great job, those two. And for their tireless work on behalf of nearly 35 million Americans living in opportunity zones. Tremendous community. Since we passed our historic tax cuts and reforms just over 1 year ago, wages are rising fast, and they're rising most quickly for the lowest income Americans. You know, you keep hearing about for the wealthy. It's not the wealthy. It's for, frankly, if you look at it, blue-collar workers, lower income people are rising the fastest. African-American unemployment, Hispanic American unemployment, Asian American unemployment have reached the lowest levels in the history of our country. That's great, right? New jobless claims are the lowest in 50 years. Private employers have added an average of more than 6,500 jobs every single day. Think of that. It's amazing. And something I'm very proud of and worked very hard with Jared and everybody on was judicial reform and to give inmates a second chance at life. We passed the bipartisan criminal justice reform. So many things have happened since that's happened. And very interestingly, one of the things that we've done that has helped this so much, prisoners coming out, people don't want to hire them. They just don't want to hire them. It's got something, stigma, call it whatever you want. They weren't being hired. This is for, I would say, since our founding. Very hard for prisoners. This is the best they've ever done by far. They're coming out and they're having not only job offers, but they're having choice. And employers are coming back and we sample them. I know some. And they are so thrilled with what they're getting. And I can't say in every case, because that's not the case no matter who you hire. But they are thrilled. I had one gentleman tell me, man I know, a businessman, he said, I've hired some people coming out of prison I never thought I'd be doing, and I'm doing it, and they're some of the best employees I have. And that was done because the economy is so strong. Because, frankly, they're having a hard time getting people. And now they're taking people that they wouldn't have liked and they would have never taken, and they're putting them in, and they're finding them to be phenomenal. So it's never happened before like it's happening now. People coming out of prison are getting a second, and in some cases a third chance. I've also signed the single largest bill to combat the opioid crisis to help free Americans from the scourge of addiction. There's never been anything like it. Over the last 10 years, what's going on is incredible. And we're stopping them, much more so at the border. We will, as soon as the wall is built, we'll have a tremendous impact. And Border Patrol has been incredible. Kevin's doing a great job. We have an amazing group of people on the border, and Homeland Security generally. ICE has been incredible what they're doing. They're taking MS-13 out by the thousands who came into our country, the gangs, rough people. They're getting them out. So ICE has been unbelievable. And law enforcement generally has been just unbelievable, the job. You know, our numbers are way down, meaning in a positive way. Crime is down very substantially from even a year ago. And we want all Americans to share in our great economic renewal. That's why governors in all 50 states and the territories have designated 8,700 neighborhoods as opportunity zones. Hard to believe, 8,700. Household income in these communities is 37% less than the median income in a state as a whole, so it's 37% down, and we're catching them fast. In order to revitalize these areas, we've lowered the capital gains tax for long-term investment in opportunity zones all the way down to a very big, fat, beautiful number of zero. Zero. That's why they're looking and they're saying, no, I don't want to go there. Maybe I don't love the location, I don't want to go. Then they hear about the zero, they'll say, I think I'm going to go there. And then they start liking the location, right? A great football player. You are some player, huh? I'll never fight you, I promise. That'll never happen. Great player, Scott. Our goal is to rebuild homes, schools, businesses, and communities that need it the most. And we have just, I don't know, we've hit something that's very unusual. This is a very surprising thing to everybody, even to me to a certain extent. You know, you do things. Nobody thought it was going to catch on like it's caught on. So here with us today is the mayor of Vicksburg, Mississippi, George Flaggs, who over the last year has worked with private investors to save and create more jobs in the city. Where's George? George, stand up, please, George. Thank you very much. Thank you, George. Mayor Flaggs, I want to thank you for your tremendous partnership. You've really helped inspire us, I must say, and you have done an incredible job, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy all the way. And I'd like to ask, if I could, I'll get you up a second time, because I'd like to ask Mayor Flaggs to come up and say a few words about what this has meant. And he really has been. He's been a great leader, and we appreciate your knowledge, giving us some of that knowledge. Please, Mayor Flaggs. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thanks for the honor to be here today. And I will say first that I think we was the first opportunity zone that was created as a result of your tax cut and your the other opportunities. But let me just say this as a mayor of the city and former legislator for 25 years, I've never seen any piece of legislation that allows more collaboration between federal, state, and local government. And just to tell you what we was able to do in Vicksburg, we have created 54% of our new jobs. And the new jobs in the state of Mississippi was created in Vicksburg, Mississippi because of the economic opportunity we share here today. But the other thing is that I will never forget, it was a plant that was built in 1889, and we was able to save that plant because technology had just worked its way out, but it's now called the Vicksburg Forest Product because of the fact we was able to come to the White House and the state government and local government and collaborate, use this opportunity zone, check all the boxes, be able to put money in our sales. City of Vicksburg, 24,000 people, rural as you get, but at the same time was able to save 125 jobs for the city of Vicksburg. And let me tell you that's bread on the table. That's meat in somebody's kitchen. And so we was able to do that. So, Mr. President, we thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Fantastic job. Fantastic job. Thank you, Mayor. Across the country, our tax cuts have kicked off a race to invest in opportunity zones beyond anything that anybody in this room even thought. In counties with heavy concentration of opportunity zones, wages have risen by now, it seems that we were talking about 8%, but it looks like it's going to be a much higher number than that. Property sale prices in opportunity zones, if you have a home, have already skyrocketed by more than 20%. Secretary Mnuchin estimates that private businesses will invest $100 billion in opportunity zones, and that's going to be in a fairly short period of time. To further support these communities, I recently established the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, chaired by Secretary Carson, who, by the way, is doing a fantastic job at HUD. He's really doing a fantastic job at HUD. Its mission is to marshal 16 federal agencies and coordinate dozens of existing federal programs to provide maximum support to opportunity zones. And here with us today is a man who I knew through watching him on television. And he was a great football player. He's a businessman. He's a former state legislator and retired from the NFL after about 10 or 12 years or something. Huh? 9 years. That's not bad. 9 years, not bad. That's a long time in the NFL. Scott Turner, a special man and a man who is really out there. He's working 25 hours a day. He's doing an incredible job. Everybody loves him and they respect him. They respect him a lot. Come on up, Scott. Come on up.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate your vision and your leadership on this. And just a couple quick things I want to say. You know, I have a lot of joy in my heart and a lot of resolve in my spirit. Joy because as I look out on the room, what a great representation of our country, of the true heart of America and the culture of America. And that brings me great joy. I'm humbled to be here, not because of the position, but because of the mission, because of the purpose that's been set forth by the president and our great team here. And I have a lot of resolve because this is a big job. There's a lot of work to do. As you can see, we're all here. There's big ways, big things to do, but I know that if we set our face like flint, we can do it, and together we can do it. This is the greatest team. I've been able to play on a lot of teams, San Diego, Washington, Denver, but this is the greatest team because we have the opportunity to make a generational impact. Us together. See, revitalization doesn't have a color. It doesn't have a party. Revitalization starts in the heart of every man. And I say that because if we focus on the true mission and the people, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, the next generation coming after us, the kids that are truant, now they're working, the single mothers who now have a job to restore dignity and hope in their family and in the community. That's why I'm here. And I believe that's why you're here. So, Mr. President, thank you. I'm ready. I'm ready to go get it, and I know you are. So God bless you. Thank you very much.
That was great. Wow. Hey, you've done that before, haven't you? Huh? That's pretty good. You might be better at that than football, I think. I hope, right? I hope. I think you will. This new council will streamline existing programs to invest in economic development, workforce training, entrepreneurship, and safety and opportunity zones. For example, the Department of Labor will target opportunity zones for prison reentry employment. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is launching a new pilot program to support additional low-income housing in these areas. And the Department of Justice will strengthen its comprehensive effort to address youth violence and crime. We're giving a very special jolt to making sure these areas are safe. And that's having already a very big effect. It's very important. Our message to distressed American communities is clear. Your government is 100% committed to bringing jobs and safety and opportunity back to where you live. And in many cases, this is where you want to live. You want to be there. Some people were forced out by bad conditions and crime, and you're now able to stay, and you'll stay in the area. You know the people. You love the people. You're with your family. It's all of a sudden getting much safer, and a lot of things are happening. Tremendous things are happening. Today, we're grateful to be joined by Nellie Vasquez Rowland. More than 20 years ago, she and her husband started a project called A Safe Haven, which provides people in crisis with housing and drug treatment, workforce training, and jobs. Nellie has helped more than 100,000 men and women overcome poverty and achieve a better life. It's a very inspirational story. Nellie, please come up and tell us more about the work that you've done with respect to the opportunity zones. Thank you, Nellie. Hi. Thank you.
Wow, what an amazing day. My husband and I founded A Safe Haven 25 years ago with this day in mind. I grew up in a poverty-stricken community, and my husband came home from the military. And both of us had encountered challenges in our lives. And we are grateful that we had the opportunity to get access to good education and to get access to careers in finance. But it was never lost on us how lucky we were to get access to those types of opportunities. So we decided that after 13 years in finance, that we wanted to give back, we wanted to make a difference. So we started looking at the issues of poverty and specifically looking at the issues of substance abuse. And when we did our research, we realized back in 1994 that the system was broken. People that were in crisis and that ended up in the system, we found out had no way out. And we knew that we had to do something about it. We had the financial wherewithal, thank God, and we had the knowledge and the ability to build something, and we took the risk. And we decided to start investing in opportunity zones in areas that had distressed properties and abandoned buildings. And then we started renovating them, and we started furnishing them, and we started letting people in crisis live there for free, as long as they followed the rules. And what happened was transformative. As we started to bring people in, we noticed that they started to get their lives back on track. They started to get the treatment, the education, the job training that they've been needing. And at the end of the day, as the president mentioned, no one would hire them. So what we did is we started businesses. So today we have a landscaping company. For those of you that have come to Chicago, you might recognize those beautiful medians on Michigan Avenue. We employ hundreds of people doing those jobs. We also have a catering business, and we have a staffing business. And you're right. The employers are calling us. We cannot fill those jobs fast enough. So we're grateful to be here today, Mr. President, and to thank you for everything you have done between the opiate epidemic, the criminal justice reform, and now the opportunity zones. Our work at A Safe Haven has just begun. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That's exciting. Real entrepreneur, too. At the heart of Opportunity Zones is a belief that every American community is worth cherishing, protecting, and renewing. From rural towns to inner cities, we want to build new schools and factories, new roads and bridges, new hospitals and parks. And that's what's happening all over. We want to see loving homes, safe neighborhoods, and a gleaming Main Street. And above all, we want every family to have the opportunity to live their great American dream. To every state, tribal, and community leader with us today, and we have a lot of them, thank you again for your commitment to restoring prosperity, patriotism, and pride across our beautiful nation. God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Obviously, we need to thank the President for his commitment to fighting for forgotten communities. And that's why we've got the next panel set up. This part of our program is all about sharing information between state, local, and federal authorities to really get a lot of information flow back and forth, because it requires all of us to work together to make the most out of the Opportunity Zone initiative. On the panel today, we've got Kenan Fikri. Kenan serves as the Economic Innovation Group Director for Research and Policy Development. An expert in place-based economic analysis, Kenan has considerable experience advising state and local officials on economic development and regional competitiveness strategies. Also, we have Fran Siegel. Fran is the Executive Director of the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance, which works to increase awareness of impact investing in the United States, foster development of and demand for impact capital across asset classes globally, and partner with stakeholders, including government, to build the impact investing ecosystem. Ben Siegel. Ben serves as the first Baltimore Opportunity Zones Coordinator. In this role, Ben acts as an information clearinghouse by promoting development in Baltimore's opportunity zones and connecting potential investors with projects. Ben is also responsible for drafting a comprehensive plan for the city's opportunity zones and creating an investment prospectus. Jessica Burke serves as Governor Matt Bevin, serves as the General Counsel and Executive Director of Legal Services in the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development, serving Governor Matt Bevin. In this role, Jessica is overseeing the Commonwealth's Opportunity Zone Plan to engage and assist urban, suburban, and rural communities leveraging this new tool. My name is Joe Grogan. I'm the head of the Domestic Policy Council, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott Turner, who the President more ably introduced than I ever could, to moderate this panel. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, sir. Well, thank you, Joe, and we're back again. And we've really been looking forward to this. Very talented, very experienced individuals here on the panel. And, you know, I was reminded that this is a five-way partnership, this mission that we have. Federal, state, local, investors, and as well as those that will benefit in opportunity zones and revitalization. And here today, we have great representation of these areas. We have philanthropy, we have investors, we have local and state. And so what I want to do is to have each one of our panel members kind of elaborate on who they are, what their position is, and what their specific entity is doing in opportunity zones currently. So, Ben, we'll start with you if you want to go first. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thanks a lot, Scott. And good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear me in the back? Is my mic on? Good. Well, it's great to be here. And as I was introduced, my name is Ben Siegel, and I am the Opportunity Zones Coordinator for the City of Baltimore. I work out of our economic development agency, the Baltimore Development Corporation. And just a couple high points that I want to hit on. You know, this provision in the law is very much kind of a multi-partner and a multi-stakeholder effort. And at least in Baltimore, what we believe really strongly is that the potential of opportunity zones is not going to be met by the private market and outside investors alone. Really, it's up to all of us in the room. What's really going to make this thing work at the implementation level is going to be state governments, local governments, working very conscientiously at the retail level in partnering with investors and with developers and with operating businesses to really make these investments and these deals happen. And in terms of just briefly my role, I like to, my title is the Opportunity Zones Coordinator, but I like to go around town in Baltimore calling myself the Match.com of Opportunity Zones. Because really what I'm doing is, on the one hand, I'm working with project sponsors across our 42 opportunity zones in Baltimore City to inventory our projects, to especially identify those investment-ready projects, those projects that are going to have community impact, and those projects that are going to have returns for opportunity fund investors. And on the other hand, I'm working really hard. I'm a hustler here, working and reaching out to opportunity funds, to investors locally, nationally, in our region, to understand what they're looking to invest in. What types of projects? Is it workforce housing? Is it an operating business? What types of returns are they looking for? What's their 10-year IRR? If it's 12%, I'm going to have them look at certain projects over others. And then, at that point and with that information, how can we make the match happen? One of the things that I think we found with opportunity zones and with a lot of the buzz around it is that in all of our communities, there's a lot of wealth. In a place like Baltimore City, we have a lot of wealth. What happens, though, a lot of that wealth leaves Baltimore at 5 p.m. And a lot of that wealth is in our surrounding region and surrounding counties. And their resources are going to other parts all over the country. So part of what I'm trying to do also, and this is where I'll use my football analogy, I'm also serving as community quarterback. Right? So the role is to try to connect with these investors, to try to show them the opportunities in Baltimore City, and then bring to bear the leverage that we can through the city and through the state with tax credits, with our own loan funds, to especially make projects that maybe are being viewed as a little bit more off-market or below market work for equity investors.
Thank you, Ben. Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Burke. I am the General Counsel for the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development. We are the statewide economic development agency. And just to clarify, our capital city is Frankfort and our largest city is Louisville. Do not pronounce it incorrectly. I did not want to correct the secretary while he was up here and he was trying to catch us. So Kentucky was one of the first states to have our opportunity zones certified by Treasury, and the day those were announced back in April of 2018, a website went live, kyoz.com. It's my favorite website in the world because it has all of our information about opportunity zones in Kentucky on that website. It has all the regulations summarized being the operative word, and it shows how investors can benefit. But the key thing is it shows where all of our opportunity zones are. You can go down just like Google Maps and see down to street level exactly what the parameters of our zones are. You can search a specific address and see if it's in the zone. And you can go and see projects. So we've invited communities, businesses, developers, entrepreneurs to upload their projects onto our website. And if you go there, the first thing you see scrolling across the top is a menu of projects in Kentucky that are ready to be invested in now. And so we've put that together for our investors to make it as easy as possible to put your investment dollars in the state of Kentucky. What we've done recently is we've also invited investment funds to put their information on that website. It's kind of the same thing you were talking about, to make that matchmaking function very easy. We want to make it easy for our investors to find the projects and for the projects to find the investors. And of course, it's an ever-evolving process. This is still a new program, so we're continually improving that. And at the Cabinet, it's a team effort. We have marketing, we have our entrepreneurship group, we have legal. It really is a team effort, and our governor has been fantastic about really promoting these zones. What we are doing to make sure that people out in the state are aware of the benefits of these zones is we are doing informational tours around the state. So we're going to different groups and talking, but we're also holding workshops around the state where we'll go out, we'll do a 30 to 45-minute presentation on what opportunity zones are, kind of go through the technicalities, but then we show communities how to market their projects and entrepreneurs and developers. We know that every single zone in Kentucky has projects. That was part of our criteria for picking them. And so we're helping communities figure out how you package up those projects and present them to investors, because that's a skill set that not all of our communities have, because they've not really needed to have it before this law. Investors weren't knocking down their door. Now with this law, we have investors who are interested in these areas they weren't looking at before. And so we're making sure that these communities that didn't have to deal with this before, they now have a really good problem. They're having to talk to investors. We're making sure they have the tools to do that, and that's something we're very focused on. Something else we're doing is we're trying to hold events to put investors and projects together. And we're having a really big one in May 22nd through the 24th. We're actually bringing in China. It's the China-U.S. Governor Summit. We're having it in Kentucky. And as part of that, we're bringing in investors and opportunities on projects from actually across the country. So if your areas have projects that you want to pitch to international and domestic investors, get in contact with us. Every state is invited, but we're going to be putting one-to-one investors to projects, sitting them down so projects can pitch directly to investors. So that's May 22nd to 24th in Lexington. So that's part of what we're doing. We're working really hard to make it very easy for investors to invest.
Okay, thank you, Jessica.
Thanks.
Kennon.
Yeah, thanks very much for the invitation to be here today. So my group, the Economic Innovation Group, we're really dedicated towards rekindling entrepreneurship throughout the United States and combating our growing economic geographic divides, which have been getting worse over the past decade. Just recently a study came out that there's no metropolitan area in the United States where a poor resident is more likely to live in a growing a community than a declining one. So that's a really kind of damning indictment of the status quo. And Opportunity Zones was an idea that we were involved with from the very beginning that's really meant to turn that on its head. It is meant to help the market now work in favor of communities that really need the market working for them rather than against them. So it's been a really exciting and thrilling journey so far. And one of the, I think, thrilling things about, another thrilling thing about being here at this moment is that it is a true, genuine federal policy innovation. Like this is a jump ball policy is how I like to call it. The federal government put a resource out there, states drew the lines on the court, but now it's kind of up to all of us to make something of it. It's up to all of us to really flesh out the rules of the game, up to us to man the teams, and you can run with that analogy as long as you want. So it's been, Americans are entrepreneurial, Americans are competitive, and here this is an opportunity that has tapped into, I think, a lot of latent just energy that's been bottled up in the country for a while now. So there's really great innovations popping up throughout the United States around this, and we're dedicated to making sure that the rules and regulations are written in a way that actually allows us to deliver on the entrepreneurship side of things and for operating businesses, but we're also trying to be kind of a node in the network and really help galvanize this new market into being. I'm going to regret using this line, but we're starting to say, it takes a village to revitalize a community. It doesn't just take a capital gains tax incentive. So there's a lot of work for other people to be doing right now around or in light of this new federal tool. It has changed the rules on the ground for municipalities and for states, and should really be influencing how they think about a whole suite of policies. And one, since I know we're short on time, that I want to make sure that everyone begins thinking about right now is the workforce side of things. We've crunched all the numbers on Opportunity Zones and found that there are more adults living in Opportunity Zones today who do not have a high school diploma than have a college degree. So there is a lot of workforce development connective tissue that needs to be forged. And as you're thinking about your Opportunity Zone strategies, by all means focus on the projects and all, but also figure out how you and who your partners are, how you all can work together to make sure that the people who really need these jobs are going to get access to them.
Good, Kenny. Thank you. Ms. Frayne.
Good afternoon. I'm Fran Siegel, Executive Director of the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance. I will not be using a football analogy because I probably won't be able to complete it in a thoughtful way. Our members represent over 1,000 impact investors. These are high net worth individuals, institutions like insurance companies, pension funds, university endowments, and foundations that pointedly invest for financial returns as well as social, economic, and environmental impact. We invest, and these folks invest across the return spectrum. So Ben talked about, that there are different kinds of prospects for returns, but our folks invest in, unapologetically market rate private equity and venture capital on the impact investing side. They also invest in some concessionary asset classes like CDFI loans and loan guarantees. They invest across a range of investment themes, from affordable housing to education, from manufacturing to energy and infrastructure, Main Street businesses, all the way to public market companies. We got involved very early with EIG in the spring of 2017. way before the tax bill was even a twinkle in someone's eye, realizing that if this were to pass, it would be the first community investment incentive since New Markets tax credits in the last 15 years. And we thought it would be a unique opportunity to recruit a new class of impact investors that maybe don't self-identify as such. When we go to Washington, we really talk about the fact that we represent investors, private capital for public good, which is really the theme of opportunity zones. The way you influence a market, so this is not a federal program, this is a market. The way you influence a market is either through regulation. So we heard Secretary Mnuchin talk about the second tranche and the third tranche to come, but also about engaging market actors as a way of shaping the market. And so there we have partnered, the Alliance has partnered with the Beck Center at Georgetown, the New York Federal Reserve Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, Kresge Foundation, other leading investors, the private wealth platforms whose clients are very interested in both the impact as well as the tax benefit, to be committed as a group to, yes, financial returns, but also efficient market formation through access to data, transparency and accountability, and above all, community engagement as a path to community outcomes.
Okay, great. Thank you for each of your remarks. And I hope that as they tell you what they're doing, you can learn and see, and you all will be available for questions later, I'm very sure. So here we have a great representation of rural, urban, suburban, tribal. And so, and Jessica, I'll give this question to you, but each of you can answer this question if you feel inclined to do so. But how are you educating and supporting locals? Okay, and how to package investments or package the strategy or the plan that will attract investors to their particular area. So can you give us some advice on what you all are doing to help the audience here?
Yeah, so as I said, we have 144 opportunity zones in 84 counties, so we have a lot of different locals to deal with. So we're doing the educational kind of tour, doing the informational sessions, and those are generally smaller so people can ask questions. We're also, as locals ask us for help, we encourage them to do so. We bring them into the cabinet. We'll have them meet with, our legal department, our marketing department, our business development department, our workforce folks, to kind of hit all those areas that they need to be thinking of. And we're also looking at actually hiring some folks just to work on opportunity zones so we can have basically field representatives to go out and do this kind of work as well. So we're always looking at new ways to do it, but it's a lot of hands-on, marketing, workforce, business development, make sure all those components are met.
Oh, great. Thanks. So anybody else want to comment on that? For people that may not have a robust operation as this, how do people package this to attract investors, maybe in a rural area or a smaller town? Anybody, you want to speak on that, Ben?
Yeah, sure, I can speak to that. One thing I just want to pick on real quick, though, here is that, part of how, in our example as a city, when we're working with locals, it's with our local community organizations, faith-based groups, et cetera, who have projects they're working on. And two kind of key things we're doing is that, one, we are, making sure that folks in the community, and I think, Fran, you touched on this and you did as well, are using language that investors speak. We all speak different languages, whether from community development, local government, investment community. One of the things that I've been finding is that a number of the funds across the country are very interested in workforce housing, right? In Baltimore, we have a lot of workforce housing projects going on. Our locals, however, call it low-income housing and affordable housing. So a very simple thing here is call it workforce housing. That's what it is. You're building housing set at rents for entry-level cops, for nonprofit workers, for artists. That's workforce housing. Another thing that we've been able to tap into is to try to take advantage of the expertise in our community locally, but also a little bit nationally. So a lot of the things that we've been doing with local community organizations is sitting down and workshopping with them, right? Working through their capital stack and their financial models so that they can build it in a way where, maybe you put in the right balance of affordable units so you're attracting, impact investors who want to see both returns but also impact. And there's national groups out there, too, that are doing this as part of their mission through foundation funded. There's a great group called the Governance Project that's worked with these guys over here. They've come into Baltimore. They're helping folks think through capital stacks. Just in terms of quickly on the investor side, You know, again, tapping into free information, no-cost information that's out there. There's a number of groups, Novogradac is one of them, that have posted list of qualified opportunity funds. Part of what I started when I started in October was just sitting down with that list and calling all of the funds. And what we're finding, and I think this is an important point that I'm hearing over and over again, the issue is not capital. The capital is out there. The issue is the pipeline. So we've got to make sure in our communities, in our states, in our localities, that we are building the pipeline that's investment ready now in 2020, and that investors are able to connect with. So, you know, I'm finding that it's less of an issue of finding the investors. The capital is out there. It's more about having that investment ready pipeline.
Okay. Anybody else? Ken, Frank?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'll chime in on the rural aspect because I think that's really important. To some extent, I think many rural Americans in this space kind of have a chip on their shoulder. They're like, of course we can't compete with the returns of New York or DC. But at the end of the day, I mean, there are a couple things to keep in mind. One, barriers to entry and cost of entry is a lot lower. You can do, you know, 100 rural projects for the cost of one in a prime market, roughly. So that's one. I think there's more that can be done there. Two, especially on the operating business side, there the playing field is much more level. You can build a valuable company anywhere that gets an outsized return. You know, it's not capped by the size of the market like in real estate. And then this is one place where I think philanthropies and the public sector can engage too. You know, Colorado, for example, and New Jersey too, they have planning grants for local municipalities to come up with their opportunity zone strategies and prospectuses, because a lot of these people are on shoestring budgets. So, you know, it doesn't take a lot of money to just allow them to kind of get up to speed and get the resources in place. And then it's also just learning from peers and figuring out, you know, what the viable opportunity zone rural models are. In the rural Heflin, Alabama, there's, you know, an old school that was converted to a senior housing facility with opportunity zone capital. You know, there's going to be, you know, Augusta, Maine. It's not maybe not rural, but it's a small city using opportunity zone capital to revitalize a main street. So I think there are a number of really viable and attractive investment opportunities, and there's a lot of wealth in rural America. So there's much to be done with some planning.
Great, very encouraging. And I don't want anyone to feel like, you know, well, we can't do this or we're left out. And that's why we wanted to comment on this, be it rural or suburban or urban or tribal. This mission is for America, for all of America. And so thank you for your comments. Fran, I have a question for you. How should our conference attendees look at working with impact investors and foundations to catalyze opportunity zone markets in their prospective communities?
Sure. You know, in the capital markets, we talk about market makers. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with that term. What we're seeing is foundations and leading impact investors stepping up to be market makers for good around opportunity zones. So just a couple of quick examples. In the state of Oregon, Meyer Memorial Trust, the Rakes Foundation, and Oregon Community Foundation have all gotten into the act to try to convene tables to start identifying some of the deals that Ben is talking about. Lumina Foundation, which is one of our partners, has a specific expertise in capital deployment, investment capital deployment, and grant deployment around post-secondary education. And so they are working on how they can deploy those areas of expertise around workforce development. The Kresge Foundation is also market making. They just announced $22 million first loss investment with two notable, highly impactful opportunity funds. And in exchange for that, they have written impact community engagement covenants into the deal documents. And finally, I think about someone like Jim Sorensen of Utah, who's very interested in these rural models that you talked about earlier. And also Steve Case, who maybe you saw his recent piece on 60 Minutes, this Rise of the Rest movement, trying to understand how we can get capital to entrepreneurs who live in smaller cities and non-coastal cities. And I say that by way of indicating that if you all have community foundations, national foundations that play in your specific communities, those are folks to engage, communicate what kind of tools you need in order to create the deals and attract opportunity fund capital. So those are some ideas. So one other thing that I wanted to touch on briefly that another speaker did is look at not only your residents, but maybe folks who grew up and you represent their hometowns. And this is an incredible way to catalyze local capital or capital that's moved away to revitalize the main streets that they grew up in. If I can just leave you with one last thing, it's a call to action, that this market is a state of development. You heard Secretary Mnuchin say that they just issued the second tranche of regs. There's a third tranche of regs afoot before the end of the year. You are not late to the party, you're early to the party. And we encourage you to reach out to your communities now, to engage now, because you're the ones who will shape this market for community impact.
I just want to add quickly that, in addition to being kind of a market maker, philanthropy can also play a key role in supporting the operating systems and infrastructure for implementing opportunity zones. So just kind of clear example for me, my position within Baltimore City is funded by a local foundation. We can also have foundations working with us to help support the creation of databases. Kind of a key, operating component of what I'm doing to do this Match.com is I'm building a database, right? So we've got a foundation who's helping the support of that relational database. And then we talked about kind of investment prospectuses. So here's our Baltimore City one. And again, there's a way for philanthropy to play a role in supporting the development of these documents.
Yeah, absolutely, Jess.
I was just going to say, what I get a lot is nonprofits wondering if they have a place in this opportunity zone ecosystem, and that there are certainly socially minded investors who are looking, or they still get the step up in basis. They don't have to get the 10-year return. So there are a lot of investors looking for social impact projects. So don't think just because you have a project that's not going to have a high ROI that you're not going to benefit from this. There is certainly a place for you in this ecosystem.
Absolutely. And we have a great representation of faith leaders in the room today, and something that we've touched on just briefly. But I want to encourage all of the faith leaders that are here. You play a huge role, because a lot of times the church or the faith base, you have the heartbeat of the community. And so please understand and know and be encouraged that with the investors, with the matchmaking, that you're a huge part of it, because a lot of times you hear things because of your leadership in the community that maybe investors or business people or people in nonprofits may not hear. And so, as I said, this is a partnership, and it's going to take everyone, faith leaders, investors, obviously the innovation from there, federal, state, local, and community leaders. I mean, we were talking about in our meeting, the grandmother that sits on the porch, that's been sitting there in her rocking chair for 20 or 25 years. She's seen the little kids from the neighborhood that have grown up, that have done good, and those have not done so good. And so we want to reach people such as this, and we all know them in our communities, and they also are a part of this. And would you all agree that faith-based leaders and community leaders are a big issue here?
And let me just say, we talk about faith-based leaders a lot, and I know we have folks in the room. Not only do faith leaders know the pulse of the community, but at least in a place like Baltimore City, faith-based leaders are leading development. Yeah. These are folks who are running community development corporations in many cases. In Baltimore, we have a pastor, Dante Hickman, who's leading a East Baltimore redevelopment effort. And so Pastor Hickman was here at the White House back in December, and he has attracted a lot of interest from Opportunity Fund to support his affordable housing, workforce housing projects that he's developing, his community health center that he's developing, where Hopkins is going to be an anchor tenant, and a number of other projects within his community where the church is anchored, and that's a key role.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. Absolutely.
On the prospectuses were mentioned, and they can kind of be an anchor around which all of the community members come together. And I know a number of you have already made prospectuses, some of which are fantastic. Shout out to Erie, Pennsylvania, who just put theirs up today. Yeah. And also just want to make sure, though, that people think that these are more than just site location documents or materials, right? These are visioning exercises, and it's a real chance to get the community together around the table saying, this is what we want. This is what we want our community to look like 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Because don't forget, at least in the draft regulations, you can hold your opportunity zone investment up until 2047 and get the benefits. That is a very long time horizon, and a lot of investors don't really have the ability to extrapolate that far out without kind of the public sector guidance and almost the master planning, like a 30-year master plan more than the site location brochure, is how I think you should all be speaking about prospectuses. And then also, if you're a city leader, have right in there, what you're willing to commit. So what infrastructure are you going to lay in order to make sure that, this economic activity can come around it? If you represent a rural area or a state, get that rural broadband in, because you are not going to build any companies nowadays without rural broadband, or in rural areas without broadband. So again, prospectus is kind of an anchoring document to tie all that stuff together and get ahead of the market and guide kind of what comes in after that.
Good. Yes, Jessica, go ahead.
I was just going to build off of that and make sure that projects know that they can also access state and local incentives. We always tell our projects that you don't have to tell us what you're doing. This is all private sector driven. That's why it's great. But let us know, because you can layer on state incentives on top of this. Remember, the opportunity zones, it's a provision of the tax code. It doesn't exclude using anything else that's out there. So historic tax credits, business investment tax credits, whatever your state has. Put those together to build a package. Opportunity zones are one piece of the package you can use to make these deals great. So start puzzle building.
And let me just add, because Secretary Carson mentioned it, in the state of Maryland last week, our legislature passed an opportunity zones incentive bill. So it was an omnibus bill that brought together several proposals in our legislative session this year. But the key thing is that what this law will now do is it's taking 6 of our state tax credit programs, and it's basically providing an increase in that state tax credit that's involved in an opportunity zone project by 10%. So you're getting a 10% bump in the 6 state tax credits that apply to investors, real estate developers, or operating businesses in projects and opportunity zones. And one of the really cool things that we're testing out in in Maryland, is that the incentive is tied to transparency and reporting requirements, right? So the 10% bump up in state tax credit comes if the opportunity fund investor is reporting the amount that they're investing in a project. So that's something that we feel will really be able to drive transparency, but also a way for us across the state to learn and to understand, where is investment going and what type of best practices and lessons can we take from that.
That's great. Thank you. And so as we wrap up, very encouraging to hear from you and just your expertise, and thank you for your involvement in today's panel. I'm sorry that our time was not as long as planned, but it's been a tremendous event. And so thank you very much, each of you, for being here and offering your service and your time. But as we leave, very briefly, what word of advice, and Fran, I'm going to start with you, advice would you offer to our attendees, what to look for, what pitfalls, and just a word of encouragement to everyone here, if you could, very briefly. Thank you.
Yes, I'll reiterate the word of encouragement I gave earlier, and that is the market is still new, the market is nascent, the market is forming, and we need you as community economic development leaders, we need you as faith-based and tribal leaders to jump in. Don't feel like the market is set. Don't feel the train has left the station. You heard today that it's still in a state of becoming. The opportunity zones benefit. And so, engage with your local investors, engage with city and state governments, engage with your local foundations. And now's the time. I mean, we talk to foundations a lot about how they can get involved and try to impress upon them the timeliness of this important benefit. So step up and step in now.
And be bold, because this is brand new. The playbook is not set yet, and the applications here are really broad, and we haven't thought them up yet, and we're not going to know what they are if someone doesn't try to pilot them. So if it's brownfield, if it's clean energy, if it's anything, just try to make it work and try to get out there and have as many partners as you can.
Keep listening. Remember, this is a collaborative effort, so everyone has to work together, but also be flexible and be willing to pivot. If a new great idea comes along, be willing to take it and run with it. This is a new program, and I expect some great new ideas to come out of it.
Thank you.
So my advice and pitfall are the same thing. So one is, you know, we should all be talking to each other. You know, I commend the White House for doing this event because the opportunity to connect with other state, local, tribal leaders is really important for all of us because, as everyone's mentioned, like, we're all learning from this together. So, I mean, I've already taken some ideas that Ken and I have talked about, and we're trying them out in Baltimore. I see Alex here from Alabama. We've spoken a couple times, and this comes to the pitfalls. One of the things for us to be aware of, like when I started this, I was so excited. It's like, oh, equity investors are coming to Baltimore and they're talking to us. This is great. But we have to realize we have to do our due diligence on the investors as well. Alex and I have even talked together about some of the funds we've been in touch with. And we've been like, are these guys real? Like, what are they really looking at? Do they really have capital? They're talking about being investors, but like, how do we know? So I really impress upon you, it's exciting that we've got investors looking, you know, in certain neighborhoods in Baltimore, but we also have to be careful about these investors being, you know, really legitimate investors with real capital in hand. So I think by all of us talking to each other, we can kind of do that due diligence together, because these investors are going from kind of one community to another. So that would be an important thing for us to do.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you all, Jessica, Ken, and Fran. Ben, thank you. Can we give them a round of applause? So from here, we will move to our breakout. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. My friend Brooke Rollins. So everyone.
Thank you. How about Scott Turner and our entire team up here, y'all? Thank you. My name is Brooke Rollins. I have the amazing, incredible blessing opportunity to lead our Office of American Innovation. I'm an assistant to the president for strategic initiatives. And what that basically means is that I get to work on the most transformative, most bold, most game-changing issues to truly transform America and lift every person to the American dream, or at least to the opportunity to achieve the American dream. And I can say that I don't know of any other issue that will do that more than opportunity zones. And all of you being here today is such a great blessing to this administration. Very, very briefly, I heard the train has not left the station. I heard to be bold. I heard make it collaborative, and I heard to talk to each other. If we could not just apply it to this issue, but to every issue in America, could you imagine the great things that we would get done? And just one final thing. Thank you. Thank you. One final note. I know that, and I heard Scott say this, my great friend Scott Turner from Texas, by the way, extraordinary. I heard Scott say this when the president was here, that revitalization does not have a color. It does not have a party. No one cares who voted for whom in November. It really is about changing this country for the better. And so thank you to all of you for spending your time and your treasure and your sacred honor, your name, to come here and to be part of an effort to truly lift those Americans and work on behalf of those Americans who are forgotten, who've been left on the margins, but time has come to change that. So God bless you all, and thank you for being here.